to talk about critique because it's something that I think is important for all artists, but also, and this is an unpopular opinion, I assume, not as fucking important as some assholes would have you think that it is. Let me get into it. Yesterday, I was on YouTube, and I don't end up in the artists' sections of YouTube very often. I'm very much so more into, like, just really superficial shit. I follow a lot of, like, horror narrators, and story timers, and beauty gurus, and Shane Dawson, and people like that. You know, like, they're just having a good time up here. So I usually don't really listen to a lot of, artists talking about art or, the crowd, I just clicked on a video the other day that had to do with critique. That's all I'm going to say about it. It had to do with animation, critique, whatever. The gist of the video, though, was artists being able to take critique. Artists should take critique, blah, blah, blah. And I just want to talk about that for a minute, and then I'll talk about critique in general. I think that's how I'll do this. First of all, I'm going to try to word this in a way that makes sense, because I don't want it to seem like I'm making an absolute statement here, because I'm really not. It's more a shade of gray statement than it is a black or white statement. So critique is important. It is a way to learn. It is a way of expressing one's opinion. All of these things, everyone has a right to, I believe, as, a person with a mind of their own. But I think, and this is where my opinion's probably different than a lot of people's, I don't think that giving a critique of someone else's work is a right. I'm probably wording that wrong. My personal way of going about critique is I will give someone a critique of their behavior if they're being an asshole. If someone is going above and beyond outside of lines that I think are comfortable, I might feel compelled to let them know that they're being a terrible person. That's one way in which I think critique is, you have a right to that opinion. You have a right to that critique of a person being awful, especially if it has to do with you. So there's one instance. Another instance is if that person, that artist, asks me, hey, how do you feel about this piece? What can I do to better this piece? Or, hey, I can't quite figure out what I want to do with this. What do you think? Shit like that. That's a time when it's appropriate for me to critique that artist's work because they fucking asked. So I can go in and, give them my 2 cents in a polite way, because I think that that's important too. And I think that's something that people forget a lot, is that the artist is a person, and it's just a nice thing to do to be polite and respectful of that human being and critique them not in a way that's like, your shit sucks, or your shit's lazy, or you could have done better, and shit like that. That really is like a bad critique. Like, you're not really giving them anything to go off of when you say shit like that. The better thing to do is give people exact things that they can do to better their stuff. If you're going to take the time to write a comment or to say something to someone's face that is a critique of them or of their work, you should also be there ready to give them a reason or a goal or a direction to go in to better themselves, or you can keep the critique to yourself. That's just my opinion. You don't have to agree with it. That's just how I feel about it. So what frustrated me about the video that I watched was the creator of the video was talking about how XYZ different artists were bad at taking critique. And these critiques are people on the internet coming to them and telling them, without them having asked for any form of critique necessarily, how they feel about their work, what they think is bad about their work, all those things. And the thing that the creator of this video, who is critiquing artists, not everyone is good at receiving criticism. You can consider that a personality flaw, or it's just an aspect of someone's personality and it's neutral, and not everyone is going to be able to be really good at taking critique, because critique is really hard to receive, especially if it's out of nowhere, wasn't asked for, wasn't expected, and is rude. That's really fucking hard to take sometimes. I think anyone would agree. Like, any fucking person in the world, regardless of how skilled they are, regardless of how comfortable they are with themselves, no matter how high their self-esteem is, I think anyone would have a hard time receiving criticism that was not asked for and just appeared in their inbox one day, or in their comment sections, or someone just walked over to them and said that their art could be better in XYZ ways, or whatever. It's just hard. It hurts. It can be taken as an insult by some people, and that's as a critic, or as the person giving the critique, I think it's just the right thing to do to try not to hurt the person you're critiquing. Try to just be nice. And if that's not your philosophy in life, and you don't care about people's feelings, and you don't, whatever, you just have to say what you feel because that's more important than the other person, then, go live your best life. Go be that way. Don't expect people to like you, or to want to be around you, or to not, fight you all the fucking time. But you can go be that way if you want. You have a right to be that way. The best way, I would say, to give critique is, and this is how I do it, and I give critique a lot, and I gave critique the whole time I was in college, all 4 years, and I give critique still to this day on my Discord server when people ask for it. That's why I have channels that are specifically for critique, and anyone who puts artwork in there knows that they're going to receive criticism on that artwork. And then I have channels for sharing, and critique isn't allowed in those places. It's not the space to do that. People are just sharing their artwork. They don't want to hear about why it's bad or not bad, or what they need to fix, or, I like to separate those two spaces, and I like to have, people mentally ready to receive critique, or not in the mood to receive critique. I think people have a right to that as artists, to choose when they receive critique. That's just my personal opinion. You don't have to agree with it. The best way to give critique, if you're someone who hasn't done it before, or you're doing it now and you feel like you could better yourself at critiquing people, or if you have to do it for college, because there will come a time if you're going to art school that you may have to critique in like a group setting, face to face, out loud, somebody's work as they're looking at you. And it might not be good, or you might see some flaws in it that you want to point out. There's a way to do it, I would say. And this is how I do it myself. I like to start off with something positive. This is like for an overall critique, not just like someone asked me a specific question, like how do I fix this leg or something like that. I like to start off with something positive about the overall piece. And then I'll say something that I think is worth the criticism. Say somebody has really scratchy or loose line art and it doesn't look like it's on purpose. It just makes it look messy or unprofessional or whatever. Like it doesn't jive with the look. I would say something like, all right, so the composition looks good, but your line art looks like it could be tightened up a little bit better. I don't know if you plan on doing that already or not, but it just looks really scratchy or sketchy, and I would like to see it a little bit more cleaned up. I'd like to see it a little bit more tightened up. That's what I think. I think that it's a good start. It's a good direction to start in. I like to sandwich it with a little bit of a compliment at the beginning. You don't have to kiss their ass. But then go into the critique after that, and then follow it up with another, just keep going, you're doing good, keep working, don't give up, blah, blah, blah. It's really not difficult to do that. And that goes, outside of art, you can apply that to anything. You can apply that to having a conversation with someone about, a bad life situation they're in, or a mistake they've made, or anything like that. You can do it in a way that's respectful. And what I see a lot of times happening, online at least, is somebody will critique someone. We'll just use artists as an example, because that's what I'm doing here. Someone will critique someone's artwork, and then the artist might be a little bit butthurt about it, or a little bit sad, or a little bit upset, or maybe even a little hostile about the criticism that they're receiving, or maybe they ignore it completely, which also pisses these people off. They might just, for their own mental health reasons, or they don't want to fucking hear it today, they'll just ignore the person. Maybe they'll block them. I don't know. I feel like that's a little extreme as well, but maybe they won't respond. Maybe they'll, give you a little bit of a mute. I think the artist has a right to do that. I think anyone has a right to not take criticism if they don't want it. You have to be in a mental space ready to take critique and ready to change for someone else's critique to mean anything or to be useful. And if it's not asked for and it wasn't, invited in, then as a critic, you should expect someone to potentially respond with hostility towards your critique or to ignore you. And what I see a lot of these people, like that guy who made that video, I don't know who the fuck he is, complaining about these artists who don't take critique well, or mute people when they critique them, or block them, or whatever, they're really kind of just being mean. And it doesn't take a genius to tell the difference between somebody trying to give an honest critique and someone who is hiding behind the term critique when really what they're doing is bullying, or being an ass, or really obsessed with giving their own opinions when they weren't, needed, or just like filling the void with hot air or whatever. I've never really been compelled myself to give a critique of someone's work when they don't ask for it. So I don't know what's going on in the mind of someone who is like a critic by trade, or I'm interested in criticism as a thing. I watch movie critics, stuff like that. It gives me like kind of an idea of like what people consider a mistake, or, stuff like that. It's interesting. But I couldn't be a critic myself because I care too deeply, I guess, about giving artists the freedoms to make mistakes, or to have a bad day, or to create a product that isn't quite as good as, they could have, but they still put it out because they wanted to put something out, that whole mentality that an artist always needs to be getting better, or anyone always needs to be, the next thing has to be better than the last thing, and you always need to see this upward trend of getting better and getting better and getting better. I think that stifles creativity so horrifically, and it's something that I had to let that go as an artist and be able to be okay with, making something that isn't maybe as good as the last thing I drew, or, because the alternative is not creating anything at all, or stifling myself to the point of shutting down or hating everything that I do, or going on these really long hiatuses and art blocks because I just can't force myself to that next step quite yet. It's not all about that. That's like a fraction of what it's about. You can make mistakes and it's okay. And I think that you should be able to kind of trust that it won't be pointed out or attacked. I think that it would be a little bit better of a place, be it the world, the internet, whatever. I think it would be a little bit more comfortable if, you just kind of knew that you weren't going to have someone jump on every mistake that you've made. I think people need to understand that artists already know what mistakes they've made. They are usually very, very aware of their shortcomings. They're usually very, very hard on themselves, I would say. I really haven't met too many artists out of the hundreds that I've met, both in college and outside of college and on the internet that I've talked to or just witnessed online, that don't beat themselves up already, are, profoundly aware of their shortcomings, and already have to fight with themselves to even put themselves out there, or to share their artwork, or to receive feedback on their artwork, whether they asked for it or not, because it's going to happen online, whether you want it or not. It's already hard. And I don't want to come across like I'm saying don't ever critique people because it's mean, shit like that. That's not really what I mean. I just mean I'm really sick of seeing people say stuff to an artist in a critiquing way, and then when the artist is like, okay, whatever, or thanks, or they mute you, or they block you, or they don't fucking respond, or whatever, and then have that critiquer come back and say, I just gave you a critique. Can't you just take a critique? You need to take a critique, bruh. It's just a critique. Or whatever. No one cares. Your critique doesn't really matter. No one asked is usually my big response to that. No one asked for your opinion. No one wanted to hear your critique. I don't have to listen to your critique. I already know is usually my biggest response, but I decided instead of doing nothing to do my best. And this is what you got. Maybe that's because I'm a kind of artist who does her best. There are lazy artists out there, I get it. But I think people kind of have the right to be kind of lazy if, because people have lives going on and maybe they're not feeling it. Maybe they're not mentally well. Maybe something bad happened in their life, but they still wanted to put something out there for their viewers. And it might just be kind of scratchy or, less done than usual or really quick. They should be able to do that, I think. I think artists have a right to their bad art days, and I think artists have a right to not necessarily always being better every step, every piece, every time they breathe. It's better than the last breath. I think you have a right to backpedaling a little bit and maybe, trying something completely different, and that might suck. And you might put that out there and have, people attack you for how fucking shitty your bad art is or whatever. And then you're like, well, I'm never going to try that new thing that I tried for the first time ever again because it wasn't perfect the first time I did it. And if you're someone who feels the need to critique people, if you think that you're helping, if you're just out there to be a great citizen and give people some hard, tough love advice, just be kind about it. You can do that without making someone feel like shit. Even the most sensitive person in the world, I promise you, can take a critique if you just give the critique well. There were plenty of really sensitive souled people that I went to college with, and I critiqued them, and they didn't shed a tear, and they weren't offended by what I had to say, and they didn't ignore me, because I did it in such a way that was useful and kind. And I don't think that that's hard to do. Thanks for listening. Sorry that was a bit ranty. Hopefully that comes in some sort of handy. Whether you're someone who really feels the need to give your critiques, whether you have to give critiques because someone asked, or you're in college and you're supposed to, or if you're an artist who feels stifled, if you're an artist who's received negative critique that hurt you. I think critique is important, but I think critique is being improperly used fairly frequently by people who are mean-spirited and by people who really like the ability to say something rude or mean and then hide behind, oh, it's a critique and you need to take my critique, and if you don't take my critique, you're a bad person. I think that's bullshit. I think we all think that that's bullshit. Thanks for listening, and have a great day or night.